Hello and welcome to week 3 in the psychology of personality. And here we go. We have to talk about him, and that is Sigmund Freud. Now, as you're going to see when I do my psychobabble video on Sigmund Freud, I think that our boy got a bad rap. Now, there's a lot of things that he's done and said that I don't agree with, but we have to respect him for two major reasons. First, he brought important concepts to our awareness in the field of psychology. And that's the first thing. Most of what happened after him was either to prove him right or to prove him wrong. He was a catalyst of research into psychology. So even if he was off the rails, he certainly inspired a lot of people to go into the field to either help him get back on the rails and show the value of his work, or to contradict him and say he's wrong and he has too much power over the field of psychology and there are other explanations for human behavior. Nonetheless, he was a very, very important character. One very important thing that he introduced was the concept of psychic determination. We don't usually hear about this part of his work. In fact, it dates back to his initial work that when he was working in the insane asylum, the kind of event that got him into a little bit of trouble and then caused the great mistake, as I like to call it. But nonetheless, he talked about psychic determination, and that was the importance of early childhood experiences. Now, today we think about that and we're like, of course, early childhood experiences are important. That was not the world in which Freud grew up in. Spare the rod, spoil the child, beat the devil out of them. All of these philosophies predominated early child raising. Not that there wasn't great child raising, not there wasn't all kinds of people that knew that was bad, but the amount of child abuse that was going on back then, validated by society, was ridiculous. And he said, hey, wait a minute. These things that happen in early childhood, they're important. They shape people's lives for the rest of their lives. And he really introduced to a society pretty much unwilling to hear it, the importance of early childhood experience. And now, in the modern world, we start thinking about the resurgence, not that they ever went away, but the resurgence of an awareness and investment in the importance of ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, that people are using. People are determining the degree to which individuals have experienced ACEs as a way of providing trauma-informed practice in almost every setting, from education to teaching to employment, understanding where people are at by looking at their adverse childhood experiences. Way to go, Freud! He knew about that a long time ago, and we're just really, well, throughout the years, there's been periods of time where we've really struggled to get that notion right up front and center. So that's your first discussion for chapter 3. The second discussion asks you to talk about what he called Freudian slips. Now, the origin of Freudian slips is that they're not benign. They're not like, oops, I said something. They were motivated. He felt all of this was motivated, and when we made a Freudian slip, he interpreted that as something just escaped from your unconscious or subconscious, and we need to look at that because that Freudian slip has meaning. Now, in most circumstances, when we make a mistake, we just brush it off, that I made a mistake in what I was trying to say. However, we see in the news, in the evaluation of political speakers, and certainly if you're with your partner and you mistakenly call them by the name of your ex, they're not likely to just brush that off. They might think something's escaping from your unconscious, or were you just thinking about that person? Or is that really what you wanted to say? Those kinds of things, these deep rooted into our collective idea about the meaning of mistakes when we make them. We feel they're motivated, particularly if they're against us. So, we have to give it its due that in Freud's presentation of Freudian slips, there was meaning for these, and they could be analyzed to help an individual understand their unconscious motives. At the same time, we realize that sometimes we just make a mistake. Doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of meaning behind it. In the quiz, we look at Freud's perception that anxiety results with a conflict between the id aspect of the personality, which is self-serving and simply seeks gratification, and the superego, which developed over time and represents the norms and mores and value systems of your society. I want that, but I can't get it. That anxiety thing, or something's about to happen, and that's not what I think society is like. Those things are the things that cause us anxiety. And according to this theory, so I want you to provide an example. Almost any aspect of your own personal anxious moments can be described. Not that this is how it really works, but the really cool thing about id, ego, and superego is it's incredibly useful as a description tool to describe the thing that is the id and the thing that's the superego, and you put them side by side, and you're like, I know there's anxiety with these because these are not agreeing with each other. When I want a promotion and somebody else gets it, I'm affronted, I'm angry, I'm frustrated because the thing I wanted, which I thought society, I went by the rules, I tried hard, I played the game and didn't get what I want, so something's unfair. We see injustice sometimes when we see a conflict between the superego about how things are supposed to work in society and what we've learned, and then our base impulses for what we want. So it's important to recognize those. Then we move into one of Freud's students, Alfred Adler, and then another psychologist, Harry Stack Sullivan. And these are the individual psychologists. They grew up around Freud, developed a lot of their theories around psychodynamic theory, but then departed from Freud as Freud focused on certain things like the energies that would eventually evolve into sexual reproduction. The others started to look at other aspects of our social experience. We're not even going close to Erickson, who did this on a grand scale, but Alfred Adler came along. Alfred talked about superiority and inferiority relative to your people in your social group as a major change agent. He himself was a sickly child. He was, not the most athletic person on the playground. So experiences of inferiority and superiority relative to your peers were important. And he saw that as important. So you see, a person's personality characteristics actually reveal themselves in the theories that they produced. That's worthy of a whole book itself. Now, that's the discussion, to talk about superiority and inferiority. Share the things you're really good at. All of you are great at some things. You are. And so make sure that you cover those in your discussion and talk about how it's related to your personality development. In the quiz, have a couple questions. One is the style of life concept that I introduced in this chapter, pampering or neglect leading to dysfunction, how your style of life is a reflection of your personality. That's the first question, to discuss that. And then we do the contrast between Adler and Sullivan. Adler felt that the driving force in personality was a seeking out of superiority. not necessarily ego superiority, like I'm better than everyone, but that I'm at least as good as, if not better, to find my mojo, to find what I'm good at. You can almost equate that to, people who seek vocation, not just jobs. I want to find out the thing that I'm really meant to do. That kind of motivation was really a lot about what Adler was about. Sullivan, however, another theory describing those same processes, but Sullivan focused on interpersonal stability, which can sometimes be really contrary to the motivations of Adler's theory. So I want to keep friends. I want to maintain relationships. That's a major focal point. Now, if both of these are correct, and usually that's how we can approach this, how do I seek out superiority and what I'm good at while at the same time maintaining very good interpersonal relationships? The combination. Now, they are different. I'm asking you to contrast them, but you can also talk about how they might come together to really produce the individual who was able to balance both, was able to come at, maybe I'll summarize it like this. Maybe they achieved superiority without having to hurt anybody along the way or walk on them or anything like that. They did it in a way that they gathered to people to help them by lifting other people up, those kinds of things. When you look at those two combined, it's actually a pretty impressive theory of motivation of achievement. I not only want to become really good at things, but I want to make sure I don't hurt anybody along the way. Adler and Sullivan working together. Two theories kind of coming together. So enjoy this. Enjoy this great content, being introduced to Freud, all of that stuff. I'm hoping to get the Freud video out pretty soon. There's a lot to it. Don't know if I want to chop it up into two pieces. Freud's a very important character, but I'll see what I can do about getting that out soon. So have a great week, and I'll see you in the discussions.